Welcome to the Taiwan Media Lounge on the 21st of April. I'm Sonic, and with me we have...
I'm Steve.
I'm Vic.
And a very, very special wide guest we have, Mr. Darren Dioge.
Hello, hello. Thank you, guys. Nice to be here.
An extra special guest, we've got Mr. Andrew Gough. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, guys.
How are you doing, mate? Andrew?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Not a problem. And also from Minnesota, we have Reset.
Hello, all.
Well, that's the lounge tonight, and we're going to have a fascinating chat with Andrew and Darren about all sorts. I see you're a bit of a film star, Andrew.
Well, I try to keep that a bit quiet, but yeah, that's just emerged in the past couple
Don't
years.
send emails with I'm in 2 films to me then.
I just thought it'd be a nice diversion from bees, really, to talk about the films.
Okay.
When I make a film about bees, now that'll be something.
Not a bee movie, I hope, no.
Well, the other two are, so I don't know why that one didn't.
yeah.
Just don't get a Seinfeld.
So the Stone and the Paranormal Hunting, what was all that about?
Those are psychological thrillers in the vein of Hammer horror films. So they're definitely of the B-movie genre.
And is it recent? Is that 2011?
Yeah, the Stone came out last summer, straight to DVD, of course, but definitely worth renting.
All the best ones, yeah.
Yes, and Paranormal Hunting came out this year, so all
right.
They're quite watchable. You know, they're as good as anything that you'd see on the Horror Channel.
Okay, I'll illegally download them as soon as we're off air then.
Yeah.
I heard somewhere that Stone was based on you, roughly based on you, as a womanizing, drinking esotericist.
Well, it's funny you should say that. But I took great offense through being so typecast. But it was, it was good. It was fun because I play sort of just that, kind of a fraud who convinces these devotees that I could help lost souls into whatever place in the afterlife they need to go to. But I'm just a fake. But then something paranormal happens, and I go on a bit of a hero's journey of becoming quite vulnerable and not the jerk I was when I started the film, kind of thing.
Don't spoil it for us.
Pardon?
And what's the cost of the Blue Moon Inn? Is that?
Yeah, it's basically what's loosely based on the Matthew Hopkins story, but it's about a blue moon that happens every 100 years and up in the Peak District, and I play a character who is a professor of astronomy at University of North Wales.
Right.
And I think the blue moon happens for completely sort of scientific and normal reasons, but the rest of the people who have all gathered at this hotel think it's paranormal and it's the work of the mother goddess, and sure enough, they're right, I'm wrong, and I get my throat slit and die.
And you're spoiling it.
Very fashion. Well, if you watch the trailer ends with me bleeding onto the camera after the mother goddess slits my throat.
Nice. Yeah. Fuck the guy up.
Exactly.
Okay, right. Well, that's the film career over and done with. You did a few documentaries, yeah. I mean, I did hear this on when you were on Henrik on Red Ice about the Arthur and the truth behind King Arthur, and they were none too impressed, I heard, with your research originally.
Well,
What they wanted to hear.
Yeah, that's very true. The National Geographic was they're trying to promote a real historical Arthur, as you might expect, and I was pleased that I think I sort of influenced them. If you see the documentary, they sort of lean towards this view, which is kind of my view, which is that Arthur probably didn't exist like we think he existed, and a lot of people who embodied that archetype through history and in different Celtic nations, France, Italy, Scotland, Wales, etc., all sort of, they all lay claim to Arthur because there were individuals in those places around those times that embodied those characteristics. But you're talking about what I think is an archetype based upon as above, so below, what was observed in the sky, really. 12 Knights of the Round Table, 12 battles, et cetera, et cetera.
Prices of the Zodiac and all that.
Yeah. But that was good fun, and it was fantastic to be in. Actually, used to meet Ronald Hutton, who is, a national treasure like no other. The man is just a walking encyclopedia, and he can spin any topic any which way, backwards, forward. He's just amazing. So it was a thrill to be in a show with him.
Yeah, cool, excellent. And that's out then, isn't it?
Yeah, that was out sort of autumn last year,
right? And
that's still showing on the National Geographic.
Yeah. I want to watch it, but I'm sure I can Google it and get it.
Yeah, they really do a good job. It looks, well, they did spend a fortune on it, and it shows. It's myself and Graham Phillips, and I always forget the woman's name, forgive me, but she was on, she was the newest member of Time Team. She's now no longer doing that. So it was the three of us kind of co-presenting it.
Okay, excellent. Sweet, so Nostradamus is pretty self-explanatory, I guess, and the alien within.
Yeah, the Alien Within hasn't come out yet, but
well, like in John Hurt.
Post-production.
Yeah, it's definitely in post-production, but I've got some great. We have some great material. It's me going on a journey of looking at the alien abduction phenomenon, and so I go to the home of Colin Wilson and Nick Pope and Liz Picknett and Susan Blackmore. Some real heavyweights in the genre, but what I'm asking them is, are we not looking at not an extraterrestrial phenomena, but an interterrestrial phenomena that is perhaps an extension of the old hag, sleep paralysis, only modernized, and that's kind of where I'm going with it. But what was really interesting is, along the course of filming and researching, we were down with in Dartmoor with Nick Pope and Bridget Grant, who is one of the most famous alien abductees, the most famous in Britain, and got to be good friends with both. And they turned me on to a woman in a Muslim woman in Wales who had filmed her abduction from her bed. And so I had the really good fortune of going to meet her. She's a great lady, and as you know, there is no alien archetype outside of jinn in the Muslim world, and she was having these dreams that she was being abducted from her bed, and she told her husband. The husband said, "There's absolutely no way you could be being taken from the bed." And it happened a second time, and she's understandably really upset. So she asked him, what are you going to do about it? And he went and got the CCTV, the webcams from work, and brought him home and put him in the bedroom. Nothing for 3 nights. Then the 4th night, she said she was abducted and taken onto a ship. And there were operations performed, etc. And he said, impossible. In fact, let me show you the footage. Here's how you can replay it. But at 3:13, I think it was, in the morning, she leaves her bed for 13 minutes on video. I mean, she's taken from the bed. It's incredible footage, and is, giving me pause to my.
And what's she taken from her bed? Who?
Well, she's in bed with her husband. Her husband is, she's probably 40, he's probably 60, and he's a big guy. And the sheets kind of go straight up in the air, and then they come down, and his impression in the bed is there, hers is not. And then she comes back 13 minutes later with the same kind of effect. And it's interesting. So she's had NASA, she's had various people look at it, and is in the process of gaining an increasing amount of acceptance for the authenticity of the video.
What kind of aliens were they?
Well, of course, we as the viewer don't see any aliens. We just see her leaving the bed.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not getting up and leaving, but her body just disappearing from the bed, and she has seen a ship outside of her window. And I've been to her home, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's it's classic alien abduction imagery and behavior from that point on.
Wow. So you're saying like the alien within. How does that relate to like an external ship?
Well, her experience absolutely sort of invalidates my hypothesis. There's no doubt about it. So I'm still inclined to think that they're one and the same. I've spoken to a lot of sleep paralysis experiencers, and you look at Persinger's Dr. Persinger in Canada. His God helmet puts pressure on the temporal lobes, and you can recreate sitting in a laboratory. You can recreate the experience of being abducted, of being taken into a ship, feeling as though you're being operated on. All that can be prompted by messing with the temporal lobes. So, I have a lot of respect for this woman, and the jury is still out.
Yeah, we have a bit of an expert on astral projection sort of listening at the moment, and she's saying that sounds like she's astral projecting.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
I astral project often, and the one vivid memory I had when I astral projected was I was looking at a ship below me, and I was looking at, it's kind of like hieroglyphs on the ship, and while I was looking, next thing you know, I was in the ship, and I surprised the two Greys as much as they surprised me. As soon as I was on the ship, they turned around and ran and grabbed me and started throwing me around. And they shot me with something in the back of my neck that made me go back into my body. But then at the same time, I was watching them throw me around. It's like I astral projected again. So I was outside my body 3 different times, watching it. And these Greys, I don't know if all the people you talk to mention about their eyes. These two that you could tell they were Greys, but they had human features, and they had the big head. They were tall, they were thin, and they had the eyes, the bluest and greenest eyes I've ever seen. Have you heard that before?
Well, absolutely. The Greys is something that all the people I've spoken to, Mark Bell, who is the former chairman of the Alien Abduction Witness Protection Program, Bridget Grant, others all have experienced the Greys as you've described, and
So you say there's a department called the Alien Abduction Protection.
The Witness Protection Program. Alien Abduction Witness Protection. But you know, the most interested in your astral projection experiences because the most famous alien abduction experiments in a controlled environment where people have been strapped into a chair, sleep, and have a real vivid alien abduction experience of going into a ship, etc., and they recount it in minute detail, but the person sitting next to them can attest to the fact that they've never left the chair. So for me, I'm of the belief that it's intraterrestrial. They're not coming into our world necessarily, but we're going into theirs, and it can be as real as ours.
Yes, that's what I have my own show on Thursday, and I talk about the astral projection. And the way I explain to people, it's just as real as what we see here. Mm. You know, if you look at yourself, you have a body. We are going into their dimension. Instead of them really coming into ours, we're going into theirs. But they can come into ours if they choose to. But everything is just as real when you add on the other dimension as what you see here.
You know, that makes a lot of sense to me because if it were the other way, if it was exclusively they're coming into our world, then where is the evidence over all these tens of thousands of years? There's got to be some physical remnants of these experiences, these visitations, and there are none.
Well, like, not to bring up Aleister Crowley, but I had watched a documentary about Aleister Crowley, and I had this experience with the Greys on the ship way before I happened to see this documentary. And they showed some of Aleister Crowley's drawings. And it happened, one of the drawings happened, I guess he called them the Elohim. Oh, that was exactly what I seen when I astral projected, which was the Grey.
So do you think he's...
The one that he was saying he was getting his information when he was doing his rituals, and the one that he said he was speaking to on the other side?
Yeah, Lassie, I think it's
Lassie,
called.
Yeah. The Book of the Law did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a Grey.
But do you think these Greys are kind of synonymous with like incubus and succubus of medieval times? You know, depicted in
well, I think there's a whole. There's not just Greys out there. There's like there's a fairyland. There's not just Greys. There's things that look like goblins, and everything that we've seen in myth are actually in this other dimension reality. So it makes you think that, you know, just like now, the things that we see on TV, the movies that they do of these aliens and how much they know, and they show us on TV, just like the myths, when they were talking about vampires, and I was talking a little bit about that, and the werewolves. They're actually real, and they're on another dimension, and they can come in. Those aliens can come into our dimension, and we can go into theirs.
Well, your question about the incubus and succubus, I think, is really interesting because they're associated with a slightly different era than ours, and that era is one where sleep paralysis was prevalent, where you see this reflected in paintings from even medieval times, where there's typically a woman on a bed with a devil sitting on her chest, and that's real.
Yeah, we actually used that, this painting, and I think it's Maselli, The Nightmare. We actually used that for our first single band I was in years ago. We used that painting as our cover. But my partner and my daughter both suffer with sleep paralysis, and they say it's like the mind wakes up before the body, if you like. So they're kind of stuck, and it's quite a frightening experience from what they tell me. And I can't. What's the other lady's name? Retta. Yeah. As far as I've actually experienced through various techniques something called the soul key, it's a way of actually consciously waking up in the astral plane or in a dream. And when it happened to me the first time, it was so real. It was, you know, as soon as I was there, I just came back with a shock. I was like, God, that was, you know, what was that, you know? So I agree, it is. It can be as real as it is here, you know. Yeah. Even though it's different.
And what's strange, there's audio going on. What's strange is that you can remember everything vividly, and you are so aware that you're asleep. When you go into the astral plane, you know that you're in the astral plane. You know your physical body's asleep. And like you said, the very first time, it's very scary. Mm-hmm. And nobody talks about it. Nobody's taught us since we were young. They had us in fear, you know, of demons and all this stuff.
Well, sorry.
So it goes on. Everybody has this experience, so everybody's frightened because they feel that fallen feeling or anything, but you don't realize if you just go with it, you're so consciously aware of everything that's going on, and I don't think people realize it. Where, you know how sometimes you dream and you can kind of move things around, where when you're astral, you can move things where you want to go, but you can't really. It's a whole nother. It's just like a world here, you know. It's so you're so conscious and you're so aware. I think you're even more aware in that reality than you are in this one. Did you feel that?
Well, there's less laws in that reality than what we have here. We're under so many laws of gravity and stuff. I forgot what my question was now.
Well, maybe this would be a good time to interject and start to ask Andrew about the bees. Let's get onto the hidden history. First, can you give us some background, Andrew, on how you came across this very, very interesting knowledge, and how it spurred you on to write your book about it?
Thank you very much. I like so many things that we end up being passionate about and spending a lot of time on. You don't always set out consciously to investigate that thing, and that's definitely true of the bees. I was studying with a Kabbalist in Girona, Spain, the home of the Kabbalah, and it's a woman who taught Salvador Dali and John Cocteau, and she's no longer with us. She passed away about 2 years ago, but and she was tough. She was really tough. You'd spend 15 hours a day, and if you were tired or daydreaming, then you know you really got a mindful about it. But she requested to study with me, and I went there because I was going to study one of the parchments from the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, which my website is predominantly about, and or at least used to be about, and we were having breakfast on the her balcony, which overlooks the sea in the distance, and this huge bee started buzzing around our breakfast table, and we got to talking about bees and ended up studying bees for several years, and then I started publishing some articles on my website about it. But I never felt as though I should write a book about it, because there's this amazing British beekeeper, Eva Crane, who passed away about 5 years ago in her 80s. And she's written, and you can't find these books anywhere, but they're massive books about the archaeology of beekeeping. And so I didn't really feel like I wanted to regurgitate her work. And my study with the Kabbalist was about different things. And it's only in the last, I would say 2 or 3 years, that I felt as though a lot of interesting new materials come to me that I feel now compelled to write the book, The Hidden Hive of History, which is nearing completion. But I presented, as you know, we met in Brighton. I presented frequently, and I'm presenting it at Lucy's conference next weekend.
Yeah, looking forward to that, mate.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's going to be terrific. And And every time I present it, I'm just given another nugget or 2 or 5 from members in the audience. So it's exciting to be building upon this nucleus of a really incredible story, a story of the greatest deity, the greatest god that ever was venerated, but we've forgotten all about it.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely fascinating when you look around and see all the fleur-de-lis and the battle axes and see where that's coming, you know, because they're everywhere, those things, aren't they?
Is it that everybody has forgotten it, or that it's just been masked? It's still there, and it's just been masked, and the symbols and the depictions have been given different meaning, and now people take those meanings, but still the people that have given us those meanings are still venerating the bee.
Very much so. I mean, the symbolism goes back, you know, a long time. 10,000 BC, we're seeing this symbolism. We're seeing honeycomb, beehive designs on tombs, or temples rather, of Aboriginals, and at Catalhoyuk in Turkey. That's a great example, because in the most sacred part of their temple, there's a huge wall that has a honeycomb carved on it, and right down the hall from that, there's not only designs of there's not only like a temple of bulls, the hall of bulls, and bulls and bees are related, and you know, we can talk about that later maybe, but there's also the first halo, which is a hunter with a circle of bees around his head that looks just like a halo, and that's the first time we see that depicted in art. And it's a little murky in prehistory. We have to really be conscious of what we're looking at to pick up on the bee symbolism. But once you get to Egypt, it's you know, it just hit me in the face, and it's amazing that Egyptologists haven't picked up on it. I mean, the name Egypt, the north of Egypt, the part around the delta where Cairo is called Tabiti, which means land of the bee. The pharaoh's title is beekeeper.
Yeah.
Picture of a bee in his or her cartouche, and you know, the bee is absolutely being deified for all the natural things that it provides, the honey, for medicinal and ritualistic and mummification, and you know, Chinese use the bee stinger for acupuncture and all the pollinate. I mean, civil societies that realize that bees could pollinate and give birth to their crops flourish. Those who didn't perish.
So to interject there, Andrew, you said about the stinger for acupuncture. It reminds me, when I was a kid, I was a really cruel little boy, but me and my mate, we used to put jam around a jam jar, and you fill it with water and catch bees in it. So our idea was the bees, we'd get all these dead bees, and we used to cut the stings out and stick them on lollipop sticks to fire from a gun. It was our secret weapon.
That's amazing.
That's horrible.
Yeah, and a lot of my work, a big part of the book is about Atlantis and bees. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but all we have, the only notion of Atlantis comes from this Greek lawgiver called Solon, who around 600 BC goes to a place called Sais in Egypt. And Sais is where the goddess Neat lives. She's the goddess of the bee. And in Sais is where Osiris is buried, and he's buried in the mansion of the bee. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Osiris's headdress, and I also speaking at Lucy's conference next weekend is David Roll, a good friend of mine, and I ran this past him a couple weeks ago, and he loved it. I expected him to really kick it to bits, but he loved it. And that is the sort of, beehive-shaped headdress that Osiris has, which is known as the white crown of Egypt. No one's ever known what that white crown is. All the kings that have been discovered in tombs, there's no crown. Where's the crown? Well, the white crown was a beehive. And that same sort of design we see that in Susa, in Mesopotamia. And I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here, but you have this notion that the great biblical flood occurred, and there was a dispersion of people all around the world. And we see images of this in ancient Egypt, where boats are coming into the Egyptian Nile Valley. And on these boats, there's only one item. And that item, I argue, is not an altar or just a storage box. It's a beehive. And it appears as though there's a woman who comes into Egypt from Mesopotamia. And this could be the goddess Neat in Sais. And her son could be the god Min, master of the wild bees, the first king of Egypt. But it's a Sais where the legends of Atlantis come from, and Solomon's told about this great legend by the priest in Sais, that 9,000 years before his time, this great civilization flourished. And then Solomon goes back and tells Plato, and the rest is history. But what I argue is that the priest in Sais, we're talking lunar years. So 9,000 years before the time of Sais, before the time of Solon, is actually 1100 BC. If each month is a year, you're looking at 1100 BC as the time of this great civilization that was destroyed. And that's the exact time that Thera erupted, Santorini erupted, and destroyed the Mediterranean, but in particular Crete, which is where the Minoans lived. So I tend to think, if forced to put a stake in the ground, that Atlantis was far more recent than we believe, and most likely was Crete.
Do you think that there might have been kind of trade between actual Atlantis and Crete, or that, because Atlantis was seen as a continent, and some people call it a continent, some people call it an island. And I've got a friend, Terry Brook, who's been studying Atlantis for like the last 20 years. He's a theosophist, and he was an advocate of the Minoan Theta hypothesis, but now he's changed and he's come up with lots of proof, as a geological proof as well, about it being near the Azores and something called the Dolphin Strait or Dolphin Fault. There's this tectonic plates that shift and are prone to volcanic activity. And he's come up with the idea that maybe they were actually sailing from there and having trade with Minoans, and that's how the influence of Atlantis has affected the Minoans.
Well, I think that's interesting. The thing is, we know very little about what Atlantis may have been. Very, very little. A lot has been interjected and extrapolated, but if you look at the historical account, not much is known. And
no, just a Masonic fairy tale, no?
And some people, like Colin Wilson and Charles Hapgood, was intimating that it was could be underneath the Antarctic.
Yeah, but here's the thing that bothers me more than anything is I've been all over Egypt, east, west, north, south, and seen. I've been in the Eastern Desert, Western Desert. There is no temple in Egypt that shows anything on its pillars, which is what Solon saw. And 300 years later, this philosopher by the name of Crantor says, "I don't believe you, Solon. I'm going to go check it out." And he comes back with the same story. But so I've never seen anything other than high testosterone. I'm the pharaoh. Here's images of me dragging the enemy by the hair to prison and smiting somebody, they would never. There's no other image of paying homage to some other foreign culture. But if the Minoans, who were contemporaries and friends of the Egyptians, if they were Crete, then I could see that being portrayed on the temple walls. And the thing that I argue was that Crete and the Minoans were the drug lords of the Aegean.
Yeah.
So is it the Minoans and the Greek that had the special honey?
Psychedelic, the blinding psychedelic honey.
Well, it's so true. So not only the Minoans, I mean, if you go to any museums on Crete, they have poppy goddesses, poppy princesses. Well, because they're growing poppies, and poppies is where opium comes from, and opium is where heroin comes from.
Yeah.
And the honey in the Aegean is hallucinogenic. And if you look at the Minoans' own miniature recreation of their boats, these porcelain recreations, all they show are honeycombs. So they're going all over the ancient world with this cocktail, if you like. And if you look at places where drugs were really popular, Luxor, Theban, the opium, and Delphi, where the Delphic priestess would literally put the hallucinogenic honey all over her body. I mean, all over her body. And no wonder she was talking and hearing the voice of the gods. But you go blind.
Yeah.
This drug makes you go blind, we know. And sure enough, all the Delphic priestesses go blind, and Akhenaten goes blind.
Yeah.
So is that temporary blindness or permanent?
Oh, it's permanent. And then right after Thera erupts, you see a huge series of, and the honey supply is decimated at that point, right? The drugs, no one can get their drugs anymore. You have honey factories popping up in Israel and all over the ancient world. And then you have the Battle of Troy, which is all about trade.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the drugs can't be distributed anymore, things go a bit wrong.
Yeah. Straight out of Compton.
But if you look at Knossos, which is the capital of Minoan Crete, it's the palace of the double axe. But a double axe, if you look at the double axes, which are supposed to be like real physical axes that you would use to ritually sacrifice a bull, they look very feminine. They look very bee-like, and they look very butterfly-like. And what's interesting about that is Knossos is where King Minos, his son, we're told, dies in a vat of honey, falls into a big vat and drowns. So we know there's an association with honey there, and we know they're producing this hallucinogenic cocktail. But there's this fabulous PhD in California, Marguerite, and her surname is so Italian I can't even begin to pronounce it.
Go on.
Go, yeah.
Have a try.
Kill me. She's coming over, and we're going to have a conference in the end of June. I'll tell you about later. But she's written two amazing books that talk about parthenogenesis, which is the ability to produce a child without a man. A woman can have a same-sex, a daughter, without a man, and how all the great goddesses throughout history have had the word parthenogen in their title, and have had this capability, which was the greatest sort of alchemistic process. But there's only two other animals or creatures who can experience parthenogenesis, and that's the bee and the butterfly. And that's exactly what we see with the double axe. So if the double axe is a bee, that means kenosis is the palace of the bee. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say that it sounds very much like the difference there is the difference between replication and reproduction. So the capability these goddesses exhibit is actually what our cells do. It's an interesting thing that, you know, before the splitting of the sexes, you have this replication idea.
Yeah.
So this is what these women can do is they
And
can
always,
replicate.
and it's always female to start with, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. It's always female to start with. Yeah, exactly. And so this is maybe what they're exhibiting, that quality. And
Which
obviously,
is why men have nipples.
yeah.
And
42, isn't it?
Andrew, can I go, because I'm interested in like the double axe, can I give you a slightly different interpretation? Because I know all these symbols have multitudes of interpretations.
That's right.
And that relates to different mysteries and different levels of degree of where an initiate or neophyte is at in their progress, their spiritual progress. But if you could indulge me for a second, the double axe, you know, is kenosis, and kenosis, you know, that's kenosis could be connected. You know, the Greek word "no" of "no" is gnosis, or relates to gnome or gnomon, which is judgment. So an axe is quite, you know, you use an axe, you know, when the king gets his head cut off. So there's judgment there. The actual you have, on the double-headed axe, you have two blades, and if you know, like a blade is also a name for the triangle symbols, for fire, air, and then you've got the feminine, you've got the two blades. And these blades are either side of a handle, and the handle could represent a pillar, or a middle pillar, or a staff. Yeah? So you've got the masculine and feminine blades either side of the middle pillar, if you like. So it's an alchemical symbol. If you think of the two blades are like triangles, you know, that is a representation of the three. You know, so you have the three forces. So you have two of those, which is 33. You know, which obviously you've probably heard of. You know, 33 vertebrae. Christ accomplished his mission at the age of 33. 33 Masonic degrees. The 33 vertebrae in your spine. So that together is 6. If you add them together, that makes the two blades joined together as above, so below, into the hexagram, which forms the actual like honeycomb hexagon in the middle. Yeah. So the actual is the symbol of the axe also relates to the figure 8, which is Isis, which is eternity. So if you draw around the actual axe head, it's a figure 8. Yeah. So that and the hand on its own make up the number 18, which is 9, which relates to the ninth sphere of Yesod, which, you know, 18 is 666, which is the ninth sphere of Yesod, which is the Sephira of creation, and that is like the alchemical secret is to create the golden child of the Christ, which is parthenogenesis, is the virgin birth. There's just thrown a different view on it.
That's fascinating.
Spicing it up here on the lounge.
Sorry, Vic, what was that?
I got 18 and 33.
Well, you know the word double axe is spelled. The word for double axe is Labrys, and that's where the word labyrinth comes from. So of course, kenosis is where this notion of a labyrinth.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
and so, you know, I don't believe there was a labyrinth at kenosis. I believe it's allegorical for a beehive. If you look at a beehive, if you look at my Facebook wall cover, you can see a classic example of what looks like a labyrinth, but it's a beehive.
Yeah.
It's honeycomb. And
honeycomb. Yeah.
So. You know, I believe in the ancient labyrinth that we see on the floor of Chartres Cathedral and replicated in Rock Valley and near Tintagel and other places around the world. That's a very special design which appears to have, you know, true natural, dare I say, powers. But this labyrinth in kenosis, I think, is misunderstood, and it's part of this celebration of
It'd be interesting to find out what sort of energies lie on these places where like the labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral there. What sort of energies lie beneath there to create that spiral, to continue that spiral. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a special design, and I think a lot. What you were talking about before, I think a lot of the really special symbols from antiquity once had a very basic function, and then out of that basic function came a lot of other variations on its importance. And for example, the Egyptian ankh, I have written, I believe is actually an anchor, and the definition of the ankh is a key to the Nile. And what's more of a key to the Nile than something that would ground you in a river? But it has so many other meanings. And I also argue that the Jed Pillar, which is all about regeneration, and it's used at the King's Head Festival, celebrating their new reign. It looks just completely identical to a honey dripper. So symbolically, this Jed Pillar is always being put up to the Pharaoh's mouth. Who's to say it isn't a symbolic honey dripper? But it has all these other associations and symbolism.
Oh yeah, truly, yeah. Right. So, right, you mentioned somewhere on your blog or on your website, it's called the backbone of Osiris.
Yeah.
That's belonging to Osiris, is it?
Or the phallic.
Or was that his bee stinger?
But yeah, these symbols have so many different interpretations. I find it fascinating. Sort of like, because you've got the 4 circles around the top of the honey dipper or the honey dripper, and the Jed Pillar. And I think when you think of Jed, I think of Jedi. Like Star Wars. And I don't know who it is, but someone that does synchronicity's probably gone on to this. But they're both using lightsabers, and Darth Vader's got a red one, and Luke Skywalker,
got a green one.
Lucifer Skywalker, Christ, like the sun that walks across the sky.
The
solar disc, and then Darth Vader, the Dath, could be related to Dat or Dat, knowledge or Noah or Gnosis, of this Kabbalistic Dat. And they're Knights of the Jedi. They're Knights of the Pillar. And the actual sabers could be interpreted as the masculine and feminine forces. And on the Jed Pillar you have the four circles, which can relate to all kinds of fours. The square, the 4 elements, the 4 living creatures of the Sphinx. Of Ezekiel's chariot, and also, interesting enough, the 2 sets of gold rings that are on the side of the Ark of the Covenant, which the 2 posts or pillars, supporting pillars, and like the supporting pillar of mankind or man is a spine. So the backbone of Osiris, the 2 pillars are inserted through the rings, these golden rings, and it's like the Jed could symbolise the rings are actually joined and become as one. It's all alchemical. But I agree with you. It probably did. It probably did come from the honey dripper and the association with that, and everything's sort of turned into symbolic. That reminds me of another question I was going to ask you. Do you think that this knowledge about the bees and the honey actually comes from trial and error, like in the cave in Valencia, the cave of the spider, you know, you got the guy climbing and stuff, risking life and limb? Or was it some kind of divine, you know, knowledge that was given to mankind, you know, ready-made, if you like?
Well, that's an excellent question. Images of honey hunting go back 10, 20,000 years, and you've got this notion that the bees have been found in amber as though they've been immortalized in their own secretion, in their own juices, in their own honey. And that made them special to ancient man, according to a lot of indications and ancient poetry and that sort of thing. But I must say, I watched in horror last week as a BBC documentary called Divine Women opened the three-part series with a segment that I opened my book with, and I was like, no, don't do that. They've got a different slant on it, and it addresses what you were just talking about, and that is, was there a more divine kind of creation event that signified the bees were important? And the story I like is it's 350 BC, and Rome and Italy in general is pelted with meteorites, and so they consult, as they always did, something called the Sibylline text, which are oracle utterances written by a bee priestess that they consult in times of turmoil. So they, because the meteorites were falling, the Sibylline text said you should have a day of remembrance for this particular god. Well, 200 years later, it happens again, and so the Senate consults the Sibylline text, and they say, "Oh, this is bad. This is really bad. You have to go and get the mother goddess. She lives in Turkey, and she is a meteorite." And now that's where it gets interesting, because Rome goes to Anatolia and gets the stone, and they bring the stone, which is the mother goddess, but also the bee goddess. At that point in time, Cybele is already regarded as the bee goddess. So they bring her into Rome with her priesthood, and her priesthood dressed in yellow with beehive-shaped headdresses, and they castrate themselves. Just like a drum has and
Are you cutting out, Andrew?
You're breaking out about Andrew.
We've got technical problems here. You there?
I don't know what to say. I think that's quite an
guys, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Yeah, there's a secret, hidden wisdom behind castration and castrators used to castrate themselves to preserve their voices, above falsetto, and that is directly related to, again, going back to dat and all that, it's a amazing subject.
Well, so forgive me for the roundabout story. Was there a more divine awareness of the importance of bees? What would have caused the great flood, the biblical flood, these local legends all around the world of a great flood around 3000 BC? Really, if you look at the Sumerian text, we're talking about 3100 BC, and that's an amazing time. 3100 BC, that's when the pyramids around the world go up. That's when the Mayan calendar resets. All these things appear to happen. But what could have caused all these localized floods? Well, meteorites could have caused these localized floods. So could it be that somehow that was a great swarm, and somehow those meteorites were regarded as bees, according to mythology? And what's interesting is in the Kabbalah, the word meteorite carries the numeric value 443, which is the same numeric value that B carries in Egyptian, Bethel. And so if you look at Eschenbach's first ever full, complete Grail romance, he says the Grail was a stone from heaven, and a stone from heaven is a meteorite. So are meteorites related to bees divinely?
And that was the stone you were looking for in France, yeah? In that Nazi's house.
Excuse me. I just I just took a sip, ironically, of hot water and Manuka honey, and now I'm coughing.
Don't go blind.
Yes, it's the bee's revenge. Forgive me. Can you repeat that, France?
Oh no, it was just was that the Nazi relic hunter house you were looking through in France? Were you looking for that stone?
Oh no, I just finished filming a new Channel 5 National Geographic special, but that was in Germany. So in France,
Otto Rahn.
Well, yeah. So excuse me, Otto Rahn was convinced that Eschenbach, who only ever wrote history, never wrote fiction or fantasy, was talking about a real event and a real castle, and he was able to surmise that it was probably Mount Segur, which is Mount Sauvage, the mountain of salvation. And he spent 2 or 3 years there trying to find the Grail. And I actually went to his home the day before it was demolished, and had to look around the attic and kick some floorboards up, and to no avail. I wasn't the first person to have tried that.
I'll bet you weren't.
But yeah, this notion of stones being sacred is really, really interesting, and is tied to bees. If you look at the greatest oracle stone in history, it's the stone of Delphi.
Yeah, Mecca, yeah.
And if you look at that stone, oh, come on. That stone is identical with a beehive. Not only identical with the shape of a beehive, it has crisscrossing shapes of bees going around it.
He's got a big swarm.
The second temple itself was built by bees, according to mythology. So it's really interesting, I think. And we talk about the Mayan. Mayans were really into bees, and they didn't have bee goddesses. They only had bee gods, and they were called the savior gods.
Savior gods, not Bee Jesus. Jesus.
Yeah.
Bee Jesus.
The Bee Gees.
The Bee Gees, yeah. What's
Yeah.
I was just going to chat with Joe. What's Bee's favourite pop star?
Pardon?
What's the Bee's favourite pop star?
A bee's favorite pop song.
Pop star.
Pop star.
Yeah. Rock star.
Could be Amy Winehouse, the late great.
I was going to say Sting.
Sting. Oh, that's.
Oh, fuck. Right, get out.
Hey, Andrew. We were talking. You mentioned. I think you were talking about the ancient Egypt a while ago, and mentioned a bee queen of some sort. I was wondering what you might have any comment on Beyonce's queen bee persona or anything, or you know anything about that?
Well, I don't know a lot about that, but I do know that the bee motif and style has been really influential in rock and pop. I mean, you look at the 60s girl groups, the beehive hairstyle, really, really popular. And
Marge Simpson, there's a huge beehive right there.
Exactly. And yeah, there's a lot of modern traditions regarding the mysteries of bees. One of which I talk about a lot is telling the bees. When someone dies, you have to tell the bees. And
Andrew, recount that the story of when the bees came to the
The
funeral.
old guy in Somerset, yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of a story I didn't know about that someone told me after one of my presentations, and I couldn't believe it, so I researched it, and I found it to be true. But it was in Gloucestershire, and it was in the 70s, and there was a man who, you see these pictures of men, there's one on my Facebook wall as we speak, they're covered in bees. And it's the ultimate act of adoration and respect for the bees to let them come on to you. And this chap did that, and every day he would sing to his bees, and he lived for his bees, and he passed away. And they held the funeral 3 days later, about 2 miles away from his home, and as they were putting the casket into the ground, and everyone just stopped, because off in the distance, single file, came all the bees, 2 miles away from us.
That's great, isn't it?
And they literally circled around, landed on the casket, and then went back. And the people were so blown away, they actually called the local newspaper, who came in and reported the story. So yeah, there's something magical going on there. And you mentioned about Beyonce, and one thing I will say is this notion of a dancing goddess is one that is associated with bees. The ancients knew that bees had the waggle dance and could communicate via dance.
That's how they show each other where the fields are, aren't they? They dance a little dance to point the direction of the flower fields are.
Yeah, exactly. It's like ancient satellite navigation.
I know, yeah.
They can go 5 kilometers away from the hive, find food, come back, dance. Everyone else says, "Cheers, thanks. I know where that is now," and they can go and get that food. But Aristotle knew about it. Plato knew about it. And I argue the ancients knew about it, which is why you see these images of dancing goddesses with their hands over their head, and it's oftentimes a reflection of a bee goddess, because around 8000 BC, the mother goddess appears to morph into the bee goddess, and mother goddess statues are now coated in orange, laden with honey, and the notion of a mother goddess and a bee goddess merge into one around 10,000 years ago. So these dancing goddesses become quite prevalent throughout a lot of different ancient cultures.
Wow. I think we're just going to have a quick little break, if that's all right, Andrew.
Sounds great.
We're going to play you a little song by the Rolling Stones.
Just so I can guarantee.
Yeah, that was the Rolling Stones there, and what's it called? King B. Do you like that, Andrew?
It was a great song.
Yeah, excellent, isn't it?
There was no real buzz to it though.
Yeah. I was just chatting with Dan there about how in today's culture, well, in the ancient culture of what's around today, like the Maasai warriors in the Sahara that still do an initiation with honeybees, don't they? They have to climb the trees and stick their fingers into the to get some honeycomb out as a rite of passage into adulthood.
Yeah, and that part of the world in particular, but all over Ireland, you name it, you see these beehive huts. I was just in Bevelsberg, Germany, at the Nazi Grail Castle, where they had all their rituals in the North Tower of Bevelsberg in a beehive-shaped chamber that was built in memory of the beehive chambers from Greece. So it's the rituals and the commemoration of that memory continue today.
Yeah.
In the UK here, we have the amazing Simon Buxton, who's a friend of mine and a mentor. He has written The Shamanic Way of the Bee, and he and his associates had the sacred trust, a shamanic, a spiritual organization in the South Coast that allows you to participate in the experiential aspect, the shamanic aspect of bee veneration, courses, rituals about the path of the pollen. And really, it's all about the woman. I mean, the guys are just, secondary in this story. We're just drones. It's all about the woman.
Yeah, wow. He's down here in Sussex, yeah?
Yeah, and he's they offer great courses and workshops, and they are the real deal. He has access to groups of modern day militias in Bulgaria, other places in old Europe, and I'm in the process of trying to get to know them and to participate if I can in their rituals, but it's easier said than done. But I guess the point is there is a whole shamanic element to the bee, and things like during moments of state changes in consciousness, people hear bees. Yoga, near-death experiences, all the apparitions in Fatima, Lourdes, the people, not just the young kids, but everyone else around, they don't say that they hear a buzzing sound. They say we hear bees. And it's just interesting that occurs with some regularity.
Back to the drug thing again.
Yeah, and bees and religion are really tied together. I know that sounds nutty, but Christ was referred to as the ethereal bee. The Bible tells us the first thing he did after his resurrection was eat honey, honeycomb. Honey is mentioned 61 times in the Bible. Bernard of Clairvaux was the first saint of bees and candle makers, and of course he was the first Cistercian to become a saint. And all the popes, if you go to Vatican City, we talked about Osiris with his white crown of Egypt from Mesopotamia. The popes in Vatican City, if you go into the churches and even museums, they all have beehives, not just sorted bees, definite beehives as their headdress.
You talk about the cardinal's headdress, the sort of the sailor's hat that's got a dome on top of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Never thought of that. Yeah, wow.
One of my favorite bits, just a weird little kind of coincidence, but John the Baptist survived in the desert, in the wilderness, on a diet of locusts and wild honey. and on his feast day, St. John the Baptist feast day in 2004, a bee crop circle appeared, which is a bit crazy, but there you go. And the bee in Hebrew is D-B-R-E, and the oldest poetry, the oldest song in the Bible is the Song of Deborah, and that's D-B-R-E. So the Song of the Bees is the oldest poetry in the Bible, which is kind of unusual. And right here in Britain, I mean, we have objects found in the Thames constructed with beeswax, go back to 5,000 years ago. In Wales, taxes were paid in the honey, and Britain itself is known as the Isle of Honey. Glastonbury was the beekeeper's island.
The land of milk and honey.
Yeah, and France. You've got Napoleon. What was his nickname? The Bee. His whole reign is the bee is everywhere, and the people, the philosophers and doctors of his time, all thought that the fleur-de-lis was actually a stylized bee. And and of course they're all paying homage to the Merovingians, the long-haired kings of France who supposedly go back to Christ and to David. Childeric was found in his tomb with 300 gold bees, and so Napoleon is paying homage to that. But it goes much deeper. In France, they actually celebrated the fact that their country is physically shaped as a honeycomb. I mean, they acknowledge that. It's a bit weird, really. And then you have things like, well, we're rapidly approaching May 1st. May 1st is the day that Adam Weishaupt created the Illuminati. And May 1st is, is Beltane. It's the day of Taurus. And owls and bees are related. Apis is Latin for bee and all that kind of stuff. It gets a bit complicated, so I tend to usually avoid it on the radio. But May 1st is the Workers' Day, Labor's Day, and Weishaupt wanted to name the Illuminati in 1776, not the Illuminati, but he wanted to call it Bees. But that name was already taken.
Yeah. The Bee Gees.
Well, that came later.
So, you mentioned that there was some connection between Rennes-le-Chateau and the bee.
Yeah, that's a weird one. Pierre Plantard, the last Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, according to many, he had a family crest that included 11 bees and 2 bears, ironically, and a fleur-de-lis right in the middle, which of course is probably a bee, stylized. And in this relationship back in the 70s between Pierre Plantard and Henry Lincoln and Gerard de Sade, all the main players of that original mystery, Plantard, the then Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, gives some photographs to de Sade, who gives them to Lincoln, and on the back of the photographs, it says, "We are the beekeepers." So, and bees appear on many of the family crests throughout France. And the organization that studies Dagobert, which is one of the Merovingian kings of which little is known, but is tied to the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, has a bee in a hexagon-shaped design as their emblem. So you just continue to see this symbolism everywhere, including Freemasonry.
Yeah.
George Washington has the bee on his Masonic regalia apron.
Isn't there a hat as well? I've seen Crowley, pictures of Crowley wearing a hat that looks similar to a beehive.
And this notion of orderly, regular society, and that's Freemasonry jargon, respectfully, is come from the observation of life in the hive, and this altruistic behavior of worker bees and drones, and that spawns a whole series of political organizations built and allegorically referencing that same behavior in the hive. And communism is said to have been inspired by life in the beehive, where there's really only one queen. And by the way, some ancient peoples weren't aware of the fact that it was a queen. They thought it was a king bee. And some of the early Masonic references refer to what is the queen bee, but they thought it was a king. So there's a little bit of a confusion there, but it's the same principle.
It's funny how now if you shop in Sainsbury's you get nectar cards.
Yeah. Nectar point.
Yeah, nectar point.
Like a busy little bee.
Like a little drone.
Yeah.
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
And whilst they collect your Your silence, data,
Mm-hmm.
silence.
Hey, I got something a little throw in. I just ran upstairs, came back because I had a thought, and you guys were talking about Freemasonry, which was kind of the thought I had while I was upstairs. So you remember I mentioned a while ago Marge Simpson when we were talking about pop culture beehives or whatever.
Yeah.
And then that's a pretty large beehive, but you think about the color of it being blue. I thought that's a little weird. And then what are the two colors of Freemasonry? It's kind of gold and blue, or yellow and blue, and that's the color of their skin also. And then isn't Mr. Burns also a Bohemian Grover?
Yes, well,
And such. There's also the whole thought that before the swine flu thing actually happened, there was a pig that they had to quarantine Springfield for in the movie.
Spider Pig.
Yeah, the spider pig. I don't know. It's just a thought I had when I came down. I wanted to come down and mention it, and you guys were talking Freemasonry and bees, so I was like, okay, perfect time to interject.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the shape of the bee, its abdomen is 7 horizontally striped, yellow and black alternating stripes. And first of all, I argue, and I can't believe it's never been argued before, but if Egypt's the land of the bee and the pharaoh's title is beekeeper, and there's a picture of the bee in the pharaoh's cartouche, why would the death mask of a pharaoh, say Tutankhamun, which is yellow and black horizontal stripes, not be an ode to a bee? We talked about these dancing goddesses and the notion of the ancients were aware of the waggle dance. The giveaway in the Minoan culture, they have these tiny little coin-sized seals that were used for royalty and for offerings to the dead and things like that. And they show these dancing goddesses, and Marjorie Gimbutas talks about this as well. You have these dancing goddesses, and the giveaway that you're actually looking at a bee goddess is that the skirt, and it's a skirt, not a dress, has 7, usually 7, sometimes more, but usually 7 alternating yellow and black stripes in the skirt, which is an ode to the bee goddess. And around the time of Egypt and other ancient cultures, you have Malta, and Malta is a bit weird because the bees in Malta have the biggest abdomen of any bee in the world. And what do you find in Malta but the biggest goddesses anywhere in the world? Just huge temples dedicated to the goddess and huge statues of very, very large women. And right before I presented in Brighton, Nick, I think I mentioned that I was on a different radio station, and a woman emailed me to say that she's not really esoteric, but she went to Malta on a holiday, and she went into the famous temples there, and she had vision that there were women in honeycomb cells who were adorned but fed, force-fed all day long, and they had become too big to leave their cells. But the purpose of feeding them and making them so large was to produce these gargantuan children. And I joke about how that reminds me of my homeland in the States, but never mind. And sure enough, Malta means honey in ancient Greek. So it's just interesting that there's this tradition of bees and goddesses.
Yeah. I mean, honey, it's an amazing substance, isn't it? It's got so many qualities, antibacterial, antiviral, and sustenance.
Well, it's the only food that never goes off, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a magical in itself.
Very. Without refrigeration or
anything. It doesn't evaporate, doesn't do anything, that's it. We were talking during the break about the, if you want to talk about the Israelites in the desert, instead take any food or anything with them, the only thing that would have lasted would be honey. You know, anything else would evaporate or go off. Obviously, you'd have to carry along with you, keep you going for years, but hey.
Not unless you have some bees with you.
Exactly.
Well, they had
Locust.
was it locust day, Andrew?
Yes, yeah,
Honey.
bees and locusts.
Wow. That's a hell of a diet, that, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
I have actually seen them deep fried locusts in Thailand. Yeah, I didn't try one, but I saw them.
You know, something else that I've been kind of wondering about is the word for swarm. The ancient word for grape is the same as the word for swarm.
Grape?
Yeah. Grapes. The ancient word for grapes is spelled the same as the word for swarms. And if you look in the Bible, you've got the flood hero Noah, and he has this incredibly stressful, life-threatening ordeal. He survives it. The first thing he does is plant a vineyard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He needs a drink.
Well, I see it as an alchemical metaphor. Yeah, all this is, I mean, yeah, like you say, it comes from physical things, actualities of like the honey dipper, but all this symbolism all over that you're discovering and revealing, it's all got an alchemical basis to it. And I know you mentioned the boar earlier, and the boar. It's all about a process, like Noah and the wine, and this relates to like Rennes-le-Chateau with the blue apples, and Dionysus. He's got a connection with the bee. Was he born? He's brought up by bees or something in a cave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And he's the god of wine, and you get him depicted holding the wine. You know, that Christ turned water into wine, and you've got the water in the flood. There's all connections here, and he turned that into at the wedding of Cana. The wedding of Cana is where you put on the white garments. The garments, what the Gnostics would call the robe of glory, and it's an alchemical. It's another alchemical metaphor. The whole Bible, just like Corpus Hermeticum, on all these ancient scripts. They're all revealing this message, and I find it amazing. I mean, I don't know if you want to go on and talk about the bulls and Apis and.
Yeah, well, thank you. And one last comment about Noah. What I'm wondering, you mentioned Dionysus, god of wine. Noah survives this amazing ordeal and plants a vineyard. It's never resonated with me, but if as it occurred so often, there's a mistranslation in an ancient text from ancient text into the Bible or whatever the case may be. Could the word grapes have been mistaken for swarm? Because Noah, who I argue these boats from Mesopotamia after the flood are carrying bees. So the first thing you would do after the flood is reestablish the home for the bees, and maybe there would be a swarm. Maybe Noah was harvesting the honey and not a vineyard. I'm not sure, but I'm sort of exploring that at the moment. But yeah, the thing about bulls is fascinating because again, you go back to Catalhoic and you have temples of bulls next to temples of beehives, next to the first halo of bees swarming around a man's head. You go back to France and you have these fantastic caves where you have drawings of bulls, huge bulls, on the cave walls, deep into a mountain, way underground. And on top of the bulls, you have young men typically jumping over the bull, this bull leaping imagery is really ancient, and we see that in Crete, we see that in the Mayan civilization. So there's something going on with bulls, and I think we get our best glimpse of that in Egypt. The Apis bull was venerated in Egypt, and Apis in Latin means bee, and Apis spelled backwards is Sipa, referring to the great shepherd in the sky, and that's perhaps our first clue. Taurus is Latin for bull. Apis is the genus of the honeybee, and there's a lot of veneration of the Apis bull by various gods, Osiris, Ra. Ra, by the way, cried bees as tears. But anyway, Herodotus, who I think is massively underrated, this guy was amazing. He wrote down and recorded so much vital information. He tells us that it was only the black bulls with special marks, a white disc between the horns, that were Apis. And he records that the Apis were venerated for a long time, as long as Egypt ever existed. And we have this mythology that says when an Apis bull dies, bees are born out of its carcass. Specifically, 1,000 bees are born. And what's interesting is the guy who discovered the Serapeum, the Apis bull necropolis near the steppes in Egypt, in Saqqara, he actually discovered it because he saw bull horns coming up from the sand. And that's part of the mythology about this. And if you look at the Serapeum, it's the place where Apis bulls were buried. But I also argue and explore the fact that this could be where Mithraism, the ritualistic slaughter of bulls, as part of a mystery school.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely is.
Born. But you know what's even more disturbing is this notion that the bull rings in Spain, where bulls are slaughtered, of course, are built over Mithras temples. So this tradition continues that I think started pre-Roman. You know, it's not just a Roman thing. I think it was in Egypt at the Serapeum. But if you look up in the sky and the constellations at that time, it's as above, so below. You have a hunter who is killing a bull.
Oh.
And there was no Sky TV back then. You watched the night sky, and then when you saw this great play unfolding in the sky, the mystery school would, reenact it on the ground. So I think a lot of as above, so below is going on with Mithraism, with King Arthur, possibly respectfully with Jesus Christ, things like that, archetypes that we have forgotten aren't real, but were just acts observed in the night sky.
Well, Andrew, I'm a Taurian, so yeah. The Bulls
Taurus starts today, doesn't it?
Yeah. Is it today?
Yeah.
Oh, we're just saying goodbye to Darren.
Yeah, I've got to go to bed. I've had such a long day and a big drive yesterday, and I'm at it again tomorrow. So nice chatting to you guys. Absolute pleasure, and hope to see you again soon.
And he'll see you next week, Andrew, at the festival.
Well, I'll see you next week. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Likewise. You take care.
All right. Good night.
All right, take care, Darren. Hey, Andrew, I had another question for you.
You bet.
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I guess I'm not sure. I stepped away for a couple moments. You haven't talked about bees as fertility symbols at all, have you?
Well, good question. In terms of... No, we haven't, really. No, we haven't.
Oh, I was going to say, the only thing that came to my mind is I got this book about symbolism, and one of the things it mentions about bees is, well, not so much bees, I guess, more necessarily honey, and that period of the honeymoon that, newlyweds will go on.
Exactly. That's brilliant. I mean, in weddings, they would give the bride and groom enough mead to last them a month.
Right. That was definitely another aspect of it, is that the mead was, the humankind's probable first introduction to alcohol.
Yeah, and mead, in Tara, in Ireland, the archaeologists have discovered this excavation that is called a house of mead circling, which strikes me as a precursor to a Guinness pub, and mead is so amazing. I wonder if, going back to Noah and Dionysus, if there wasn't really wine as we know it back then. It was more, honey was in all this stuff, and mead was a form of beer was a form of commerce in ancient Egypt, and so honey was a big part of that, and still is. I mean, look at Fuller's Honeydew, or there's so many different honey-based beers and wines today.
And lager's the amber nectar as well, isn't it? So there's more bee references.
But the bee absolutely is a fertility. What's weird is it's a fertility symbol, but it's also a
purity, isn't it, and chastity.
Yes, and it's also has a lot to do with after death, and honey was used in rituals with the pharaoh, and in mummification. So it's both fertility and after death that it's associated with. Which is one of the reasons why it makes it so special.
I don't know. I guess just kind of thinking about it makes me wonder. Mentioning earlier the Beyonce thing, and are you familiar with Freeman? Well, it's not just Freeman's idea. I guess Syrian's come out with it too, saying that Obama may be a clone of Akhenaten. Are you familiar with that?
No, that's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Okay, well, since I don't know, I guess I was going to ask, what Beyonce's Queen Bee persona with fertility and the possible her being a clone of, I think it was Nefertiti.
Right. Well,
but
yeah.
Oh, go on.
No, please. So I wasn't really aware of that. I'm not sure how I missed that. Is that part of her stage act then?
I don't really follow the pop culture all that much. Sonic, Steve, can one of you guys maybe fill us in a little more in detail?
Andrew. I think Steve should explain it.
Oh, it's just, well, we have a friend who believes that the cloning of Akhenaten was done, and it's now Barack Obama is one of these clones, and
Queen Bee is like an alter ego that Beyonce goes under.
Sasha Freer.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a thing, yeah. And he also, this friend of ours is, his evidence isn't 100% sort of thing. He's overlaid pictures of Obama and Akhenaten, images of them, and also of the children, and of Michelle.
Yeah.
They all have similarities with ancient Egyptian artifacts of all these people.
And there was, he also stumbled across just after Michael Jackson died.
A bust of Michael Jackson, from Egyptian times. That had been in the Metro, was it?
Yeah.
And the weird thing is that it does seem that the ancient way of mummification does leave a viable cell for DNA cloning and such.
Well,
so it sounds like the technology is totally there.
Well, it was confirmed that there was indeed flesh with living DNA, wasn't there? From Akhenaten's tomb, yeah. You know that, Andrew? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm following you guys, but that's really That's really pretty weird.
Yeah, we know.
I am surprised. This whole not to go off on a tangent.
I'll send you the link. I'll send you the link to watch his documentary on it. It's quite interesting.
I think it's interesting that this notion that Obama's birth certificate's been tampered with. I've watched all those videos by the Phoenix sheriff and his team, and it does look pretty compelling. And I mean, I don't mix any words. I voted for Obama. I'll vote for him again. So I'm a fan, but I just think, I don't think his birth certificate was authentic. It really does look tempered.
Well, Freeman's got a theory that he set out that the past few presidents have been a type of mind control. That Bill Clinton was the downfall of the man as president, and the Bush was the
one who didn't win, who was rushed into power.
And then Obama is the non-American president because he's not a citizen, and I think that you sort of predicted that before all this birth certificate stuff actually came.
Well, what he had actually said was that while Bush was in office, he said that Bush would be the last American president. And I guess technically, if this whole thing, I don't know, to me it seems like, wouldn't that be a great joke if they have everyone arguing over the birth certificate and the guy was created in a lab?
Yeah. And he's technically Egyptian as well.
Yeah.
We know that there's a...
Hasn't he been out to Amana as well, I think?
Where?
Amana, where Akhenaten's from. I think Obama's...
well... So interesting to you there, Andrew, yeah?
Yeah, now I've been to Amarna, and it's an amazing place. It truly is. And, we're talking about U.S. presidents and such, and forgive me for bringing it back to a bee, but...
that's what you're here to talk about, man.
Yeah.
I mean, the Illuminati, in 1776, they wanted to call it the bee, but they called it Illuminati. The name the bee was taken. 1776, U.S. is kind of being formulated.
Yeah.
You have Jefferson, right, the treatment about the bees. And the whole western region is called Deseret, meaning the honeybee, and it's all Mormon. And in the Mormon tradition, you had these people called the Jardites, who come from ancient lands at the time of the Tower of Babel, which appears to be around 3000 BC, time of the flood, and they travel with bees across the ancient lands, across the ocean, to America. That's the legend of the Jardites. And what's weird about that is the Western collection of states is called the honeybee, and it's actually called Deseret, and that's, from memory, that's Deseret, and there's also another name for the red crown of Egypt. There's only two crowns: a white crown, which is a beehive that Osiris wore, and the red crown is called DSRT, or Deshert, according to Wallace Fudge, which is the honeybee. So there you have both crowns of Egypt, red crown and white crown, relating to the bee. And in the United States, you have not only the whole western region called the honeybee, but on the most iconic monument in all of the United States, Washington's monument, this gargantuan obelisk in Washington, D.C., it says, "To our Lord, the honeybee." So when you talk about, how have we forgotten this? That I think, looking at the past 50 years, literally, we're making fun of the two movies I was in, B movies, but yeah, B movies were huge in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But what I mean is sort of films like Swarmed and where African honeybees kill people, and bees are really demonized in those films. And it's not until Jerry Seinfeld's that there's any kind of levity in this century about bees. I mean, bees, they're only in it for the honey. It's the classic line in that film. But they've been deified. And the story I tell is going in a business meeting a couple years ago with an exec who came over from the States, and we were in the lobby waiting to go into, I think it was Centrica, and there was a bee buzzing around that landed on the floor, and this guy jumped across the room to step on it and kill it. And I'm like, why did you do that? And he said, well, I was worried it was going to sting me. So the media has succeeded in demonizing these creatures that we absolutely have to have. And there's two accounts that talk about what would happen if the bees were to die. One is the famous Einstein quote, and I say quote because we've never found it in his writing, but it's attributed to...
Steiner mentioned it, I think, as well, didn't he?
Well, Steiner is the other one.
Yeah.
And Steiner, who's just, we owe so much to Steiner. The guy is just a gargantuan, esoteric, scientific, philosophical brain like no other, And he said about 85 years ago, 90 years ago, that right now, the bees would start to die because of the way they changed the way the queen was fed. It was a very technical explanation, and but the guy was just a genius. And he said that man will not reach the state of consciousness of the bee until the time of Venus. And in Steiner's world, that's, a long time from now.
I think I mentioned at Brighton, because I was ages ago, I've always been kind of interested in a bit of esoteric apiculture and stuff, but reading Steiner's lectures about bee, and he talks about the 21-day solar cycle and how they relate to the way the larvae of the queen hatches, and then I think it's the worker next, and then the drone, and the amount of energy they get from the sun at that particular point in its course. And he also talks about, I don't know if you've looked into any of that, but he also talks about the shape of the power of the six, and the shape of how the shape of the honeycomb, the hexagon, relates to quartz crystal, and how that he talks about something called, I think it's called salicylic acid, that happens in the body, body naturally, that we produce. And I was reading the other day something. Who was that guy? David Duranda. Sarada. Sorry, I keep on getting his name wrong. But he was doing work with resonating stones, using alternating fields. I forget what they called them. But he was talking about the stones, like the stones of the pyramids, having this quartz-like crystal in them, and that we also have this. It's similar to calcite that we produce in our pineal gland. It kind of relates. It's really, Steiner's got some great things, some great bits of information.
Yeah, amazing. He's got this great, is it 6 lectures or 9 lectures? I always forget. But it's now a book, and it boggles your mind. The guy is just a genius, like we haven't seen since. But it was Einstein who explicitly said that if the bees were to perish, man would would follow suit 4 years later. Bees started to die in 2008. That puts us this year, 2012. But anyone who sort of follows me on Facebook knows, respectfully, I think the 2012 thing is rubbish.
Yeah.
So what do you feel about the status of the bees disappearing?
Well,
and they're not coming back.
Yeah.
Not the organic bees, though.
They're finding that the organic ones are staying, but there's not as many organic farmers for bees as there once was.
So Monsanto's to blame.
Yeah.
Weren't you saying, Andrew, that it takes something like 26 people to do the work of one bee?
Yeah, China tried to employ more people by moving the bees and having humans do pollinating in plants. It took 26 people to do a job of one bee.
But what did you think about how it's disappearing? And also, a lot of people do believe that 2012, I don't think the world's coming to an end or something, but how strange that the bees are disappearing around the same time as the Mayan calendar ended. And that the bees are vital for our civilization. Without the bees, we'll perish.
It's absolutely worrying. And when I talk about this, when I present this, I share how I don't think there's a mystery why the bees are dying, but I do think there's a conspiracy. And the conspiracy is the company who makes the pesticides that are used in crop fields is Bayer, B-A-Y-E-R, and Monsanto is also involved here. But
Bayer. That's the same Bayer that contaminated the bloods for the haemophiliacs and gave them HIV. And also who started the contamination with the swine flu thing a couple of years ago. So I can see they are dodgy people.
Well, it's Bayer who not only produces the pesticides, but it's Bayer who produces the report to the EPA and Obama stating whether or not pesticides are safe. So guess what they say?
Conflict of interest there.
But also, Andrew, not to bring up the past, but what we were talking about earlier, I feel there is a conspiracy, and my thoughts as we were talking about the astral projections and the other aliens and other dimensions that we're merging, I feel like they're polluting this environment on purpose so that they can survive. Right now, they can't survive in our environment for a long period of time, in our dimension. Do you feel that they're purposely polluting and changing the atmosphere of our planet for a reason?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to answer your question and to finish the thought about Bayer, pesticides are lowering the immune system of bees. And like any other living creature, when your immune system is lowered, you're more susceptible to other stuff, and that's what kills you. What my fear is what you just said, and that is there is a concerted attempt to eliminate the bees so that their byproducts could be provided commercially in a synthetic way. So sugars and other honey substitutes for what the bees do naturally. So if you kill off the bees, it's a multi-billion pound industry, bees are. If you kill that off, then the pharmaceuticals and other food companies will profit.
It's like bee genocide.
Pardon?
Like a bee genocide going on.
Yeah, bee genocide. Yeah, exactly. So, boy, as you said earlier, no organic bees are dying, and that's quite telling.
It shows there's still hope.
I live in pretty much central London, and I don't raise bees myself, but I want to. I know a lot of urban beekeepers, and all their bees are very, very healthy.
So,
You can do things to help, like you can have, if you've got gardens or whatever, you keep part of your garden wild, and that encourages bees.
Yeah, that's what I did this year.
Fruit and stuff.
I grew a lot of things to try to attract bees. I'm attracting the wrong bees, though. I'm getting the carpenter bees, but I've been growing a lot of things that bees seem to like. I think if we all do that, it would make somewhat of a difference.
Help those little
help those fellas, yeah.
So, a matter of interest, did you know that the US Army are militarising bees? That they actually use bees and they're training them to recognise landmines as nectar sources. So they would go and find landmines. And I think they use some infrared light so they can see where they are.
Wow, did you guys see those documentaries? There's a whole bunch on bees, but it's like they said they're not even dying. They're not finding the bodies. They're just gone. They just one day they're in there and then they go back and they're all gone. And they don't find any bees around. Anybody, do you have any thoughts of where these bees are going, where they disappear into?
Pluto.
I just found it strange that they would go back and, the honey and everything is there, but the bees there's no trace of them.
The observation has been, it's as though the waggle dance is broke. They leave the hive, and all of a sudden the sat nav is broke, and they can't get back.
Can't return. Oh no.
could that maybe...
And it kind of reminds me of a weird sort of analogy, but the queen only has sex when the sun is out, and the queen will go as close to the sun as possible before she lets the drones have their way. And
Are you calling Prince Philip a drone?
and then once the drones have sex with the queen, they're not allowed back in the hive, so they die.
Doesn't the queen rip their insides out or something in some circumstances?
That's my type of queen.
God save the queen. Now that would be a good song to play.
Yeah.
She ain't no human being.
yeah. She's a reptilian.
Can I put a really quick plug in?
Of course you can, mate. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you.
But festival appearances, a lot. Go for it.
Yeah, if anyone's around next weekend, Lucy's conference is going to be the place to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Details are all over Facebook and the web.
Eternal Knowledge Festival.
Yes.
eternalknowledgefestival.co.uk.
You can personally meet Sonic if you go there, and Andrew, and Lucy, last week's guest, and Darren, who was here early.
And
So-
possibly...
I wish I could go. I wish I could
Spy
come
Check
across
might
the
even
pod.
put a surprise guest appearance in.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, in 2-3 hours' time,
Yeah.
the
3
on radio
hours.
lines will be appearing on the middle chamber with Resurrect, which should be interesting
Yeah.
and an honour, a great honour. Can't believe it.
Yeah. Our first proper interviews that we've done.
Yeah, Andrew, tell us about Arcadia.
Yeah, Arcadia is my website, andrewgough.com, where I publish my research, and I also have a discussion forum on all things esoteric, but a big part of it is Rennes-le-Chateau, and without getting too controversial, I'm pleased to have in the past month blown the lid on a very annoying hoax that's been going on for over 10 years.
Yeah. Bruce Burgess must be gutted.
Well, yeah, Bruce was over at mine a few weeks ago, and he is gutted. I mean, I speak of the Ben Hammett alias for Bill Wilkinson, and the fake Tomb of Mary Magdalene, and the fake Ark of the Covenant they were about to try and do some promoting of. I have to be careful what words I choose. And and forced a written and verbal confession, and that wasn't easy. But, you know, it's amazing to me ever so quickly that 1/3 of the people who have followed this for the past decade have been like, well done, fantastic. Another third have been like, wow, you know, I always suspected that, but good on you for proving it. Then the final third have been, how dare you? How could you? As though somehow I, who have shattered this phony dream, am to be blamed. So human nature is a very, very strange thing. But that's why my tagline is, the greatest discovery of all is the truth.
So that hoax aside, what still remains of the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery?
Well, and therein lies the really sad part of all this, is that there's undoubtedly a real mystery there. I mean, 72 AD, Jerusalem is sacked by Rome. Rome takes, and then everything to you know, the Romans take everything to Rome. And then 410 AD, Rome is sacked by the Visigoth tribe, the Germanic tribe, the Visigoths, who take it, all that stuff, the menorah, all of the emerald table, Solomon, all that stuff. They take it to the vicinity of Rennes-le-Chateau, and that's right. That's right where this mystery unfolds. So there probably is something in terms of a great relic or a great burial in the area, which is why it's even more annoying when someone's faking it.
Yeah. It's interesting that the ground around there, the geography, there's like hills that actually sort of form a pentacle. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Listen, we've got 1 minute of the live broadcast left, so thank you very much to everybody who's listening on Blog Talk. If we're all right to carry on for a little bit, Andrew?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, cool. So just keep talking if it just says, thanks for using Blog Talk. Yeah, let's just play a little song for a little while. This is a song by a gentleman who's been providing quite a lot of information for us tonight. It's called That Rosa Mel Apis.
Apis, yeah, Apis. Actually, it was inspired by you, actually. It's an old demo of a song I'd done years ago, but you actually inspired me to finish it, Andrew.
So this is for you, Andrew. Much to Vic, where he chose all the music tonight. That was Bedazzled by
Peter Cook.
Peter Cook
From the film.
And before that was Vic himself performing That Rosa Mel Apis,
which is a Rosicrucian. It's Robert Flood designed. It's a motto. I can't remember what it means. Andrew probably knows what it means. The rose feeds the bee, or something like that. That's a rough translation.
Great song is all I know.
Well, you inspired it to be finished.
Yeah, I put the bees on the end for you.
I'm honored. It was great.
We'll send you a copy.
Yes, please.
We were talking about Rennes-le-Chateau just before. I was wondering, you work with this, is it Ingrid in Girona, the caboose?
Yes.
Does she shed any light on you know, obviously there's a long tradition there that you talk about, and does she shed any light on the mystery?
On the Rennes-le-Chateau?
Yeah.
Yeah, she felt that it was, you know, I went there to study that, and we got detoured and spoke about bees literally for years, and she spoke about Rennes-le-Chateau intermittently, and revealed certain things to me that surprisingly changed my thinking about the mystery and led me to think that the Kabbalah had more to do with it. For instance, one of the parchments refers to 681, and 681 are the Sephiroth and the Tree of Life that have to do with the unmanifest Messiah. Sacred 6, 8, 1 connected together. And just as an example. So, yeah, it was interesting. I wish in hindsight we also had time to delve deeper into Rennes-le-Chateau and not just the bees. She was a fountain of knowledge, that's for sure.
Yeah, sounds pretty incredible.
So you basically got sidetracked there, didn't you? You sort of went to study Rennes-le-Chateau and then got sidetracked with the bees.
Exactly.
That's a long sidetrack.
Yeah.
Meant to be.
Yeah.
Be or not to be.
Behave.
Or behave.
Did you know that J.K. Rowling, apparently she named Professor Dumbledore, it's an old name for bee.
Really?
Yeah, apparently, yeah. I saw on the net the other day.
You know, if I can make a super quick, weird kind of segue there, I know her last book, she had 200 proofreaders, and the book still went out with errors in it. and I mentioned that because I formerly was editor of Mindscape magazine, and it's a great magazine. It continues on, but for a variety of reasons, I moved on, and myself and my good friend Mark Foster are going to launch The Heretic magazine, and that comes out on the summer solstice this year, and really excited about that. So if anybody wants to write about topics that are heretical, give me a shout, and very much look forward to promoting a lot of new voices in addition to the ones we all know and love.
I'm sure Fredo will be very
On the fire.
The Heretic is coming, and we've got Daniel Pinchbeck from Boval, all kinds, a lot of big names. But sometimes I meet people in the tube and get to talking to them, and they have a really cool idea about something, and I'm blown away. And I ask them to write. Well, I don't write, they say. I'm like, well, just give me some bullets about your ideas, and we'll write it for you. So just promoting a lot of new, innovative thinking.
right. Excellent.
Yeah.
But that was a weird. That's how my brain works. I was thinking about Mindscape and issue 4 that we put to print internationally around the world. One of my readers said, "I've just counted 200 grammatical errors." Ah! So no matter how many eyes look at it, it's funny how you just can't get that right. And J.K. Rowling's 200 proofreaders is case in point, I think.
I don't think it matters as long as the first and the last letter of each word's the right letter. It's still readable.
Yeah.
That's so true. We've all seen those sort of what do you call them? Not riddles, but examples of things where everything's misspelled, but you read it just fine.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry about it.
Thanks.
As long as you get the message across, that's all that matters.
And one last plug, if you could look for, I wish I could give you a title, but there is no title yet. My next National Geographic Channel 5 documentary coming out late summer regarding a particular Nazi relic that was found in a Bavarian lake in 2001. It's a Celtic looking cauldron. Gold cauldron, and it's the story of that cauldron. And is it ancient? Is it Celtic? Is it a Nazi relic? Why was it kept in Bevilsburg? And what other treasures could be hidden in this area? Because in 1945, in May, as the Allied forces approached, the Nazis had to get rid of thousands of the world's greatest relics that they had systematically plundered during their reign. And this relic was one of them.
Would you like Oh, sorry, go on, carry on.
No, and last year they found in a Bavarian attic of a woman who used to have, where a woman used to live, who had a relationship with an SS officer, an inventory of Nazi relics, 30-some relics, Egyptian artifacts, documents of Hugh de Payne, of Cathars, this Celtic cauldron, and others. And the truck, the lorry that was transporting these relics, there were thousands of them, but this truck had 30 of them, from Bohemia to Bavaria, got detoured, and they went to this lake, and they dumped a bunch of stuff in the lake, it appears, because they found this cauldron. And it just brings to mind that around Germany and the countries that join it, there are thousands of relics to be found to this day.
So go treasure hunting.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you if you could go into a bit more about that, about Himmler's castle, and I think on your site you mentioned about this guy that built an ark. This Nazi that built, they hired, this Kabbalist, they hired the Kabbalist, or they got a Kabbalist, Jewish guy who built this ark or something.
Whoa, what, Nazis? Jews.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Yeah, no, they were trying to recreate the ark, and we're having experiences of the sound of bees. But the Grail Castle in Germany, Wewelsburg, they Himmler and Karl Marie Viergut really wanted to create a ideology that was an ode to Atlantis, Camelot, Arcadia. They wanted to reestablish what they perceived to be as their ancient Aryan roots and give two fingers to Christianity in the process. And not a bad idea, but obviously the means to the end was not acceptable. And they chose Wewelsburg in the west of Germany because it was in an area where a great German Hermann warrior had in 9 AD beaten a far greater Roman army in battle, and also in that area is the Externsteiner, which is this incredible rock formation in a forest with a lot of pagan temples, and Viergut, Himmler's Rasputin, told Himmler that in this area, the great last battle of all time of East versus West would take place. And of course, Himmler thought it would be Germany defeating Asia, but in reality, the prophecy happened, but it was the Allied forces beating Germany. And this castle was Himmler's Camelot. All the rooms were called things like the Grail and Teutonic Knights, and they had a Knights of the Round Table. They had these ritual centers. It was all very weird and a bit dark. So the documentary's about all that.
You think they've done sacrifices there then?
Yeah, I mean, the very, very act of putting a relic into a lake, like a votive offering, is interesting. They were obsessed with things sort of Celtic.
And that sort of relates to the Lady of the Lake and Excalibur and that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
That's an alchemical. That's got an alchemical analogy to it. The sword and the stone. The stone, you can relate that to the philosopher's stone and the cubic stone, and the sword is obviously a phallic symbol. There's so much there. And the water, the Lady of the Lake, is the feminine aspect, and you've got the lake, which is the waters of life, the waters that was turned into wine. There's so much that I find that fascinating as well.
Andrew, I I have a quick kind of question or thought, and maybe you could. Around when Hitler was at his peak, they were saying he was involved with aliens. What aliens was he involved with? Do you know? Were they the Greys?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I know Hitler was alleged to have been obsessed with the Spear of Destiny, the lance that pierced the side of Christ along the cross, that was coveted by rulers ever since that time. And there's this legend that he went to the North or South Pole.
He sent Rudolf Hess.
Rudolf Hess, and
interestingly, my other half used to guard Rudolf Hess at Spandau Prison during his military duties.
Wow.
Yeah. He nearly shot Rudolf Hess once. He did.
I was trying to understand the Germans' obsession with the pure Aryan nation or whatever, with the blonde hair and the blue eyes. And that just made me think what they were so involved with the Greys, and a lot of people thought the Greys were different gods. So I was wondering, because the white race some DNA is from the Greys. If you look at the Greys and you look at the white DNA, the white race is very similar. So I was wondering if the blonde hair, the blue eyes, was them trying to get as close to their gods, which was the Greys. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's an excellent question. The top
Don't you hate that when it's interrupted? The audio just went out on you.
Has it come back?
Are you there, Andrew?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's a really, really interesting question, because the top esoteric chap in the Nazi Party was Karl Marie Viergut, and he was convinced that the Nazi regime, the Germanic culture, went back 200,000 years, and back in the time when there were 3 suns and there were all kinds of weird creatures on the earth. So I'm not aware of any work that has researched that greatly. There probably is. I'm not aware of it, but I think your question's a valid one and kind of resonates with their thinking.
Yeah, and it's just, that's something, because when I astral project, and I don't know if when other people do it, you kind of know things. And I brought that back. When I came back from that experience and having that interaction with the Greys, it was like a light bulb clicked off in me. Because first the Greys that I've seen, they look like a kind of hybrid between Oz and Grey. And it just clicked like a light bulb with the blue and the green eyes. And I'm like, why in this society is blue and green eyes so looked good upon? And the lightest hair color. And I'm like, it resembles the Greys. Because people have the image of the Greys with these big black eyes. No, those are like sunglasses. They're very human-like with just a big head.
Yeah.
And see, they were doing just like Aleister Crowley around that time. They were all into the esoteric and summoning these beings to our dimension and letting these beings possess them or them go over there. Astral projecting in there, and they brought that knowledge back. Because the Greys are far superior intellectual than us. And at that time, it seems like Hitler and Germany was a very strong force. They were above everybody in technology and all sorts of things. So I'm thinking the Greys to them must have been like a god, and they wanted to get as close to their god as possible with the blue, green eyes, and the blonde hair, and very tall.
Very interesting.
Didn't Hitler go through, I don't know about Himmler, but go through the vortex that Patrice Chaplin talks about?
Yeah, but Patrice Chaplin talks, of course, a lot about portals, and that they exist these sort of physical spots where the consciousness, for those who are prepared, worthy, or otherwise ready for it can access a different consciousness. Quick plug. The Heretic magazine, which comes out on the summer solstice, also has an e-publishing arm, and we just published Patrice Chaplin's new book, Mr. Lazarus, which is it's amazing. It only exists on an e-book, but you can buy it on Amazon, Mr. Lazarus. And it's kind of not really a sequel to The Portal, but carries on in that tradition. So,
have you been through the portal, Andrew?
Pardon?
Have you been through the portal?
You know what's really funny? I was just at the portal a week ago yesterday with Patrice, the one in London at Marylebone Church.
Marylebone Church. Oh.
Yeah. It's ironically, it's a church that was coveted by William Blake and forgive me, somebody else, an amazing author. But it's like a door without a key, and if you don't have the key, then you can't open the door. So you sit there in the portal, but I'm not particularly sensitive. I didn't. You feel some tingling, but I've never experienced the portal. Patrice has.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. So what do you think it is? Exactly. You know, do you think like Retta was saying about the Greys, you think maybe I heard that Hitler went through it, and you know, and various other people like Darwin and that. Do you think they use that to access that kind of area, that kind of place, you know, that dimension?
And maybe one of those is at Rennes.
Yeah. And even in present day, if you look at a lot of the movies, you can tell that the movies came because you see these beams that they're using in the movies and the thoughts, and you're realizing that these people know something. They're going to the other side and interacting with these beings, and they're bringing it over here and putting it on TV. As we were talking about portals and dimensions, it just seems like it all interconnects. It's all starting to really, you know, come together full force.
It's all in the collective consciousness, yeah. Definitely.
And I suppose if you take the oneness of creation, stepping into a portal to access a different part of that oneness is quite an interesting concept, isn't it? That's quite easy to acknowledge.
Yeah.
So how did Patrice find out, or how did you find out about those natural vortex in London in Marylebone?
Well, she was. It was brought to her attention by another Kabbalist, not the one in Girona, not Ingrid, but another one in London. And it's an interesting story because she went there with her good friend Tova, and Tova is somebody who I've known for years now and is, like Patrice, a really credible, straight, conservative, Tova especially so. And they were having lunch across the street, and they had arranged to have the Kabbalists had arranged to have this portal physically open for Patrice to go into at 3 o'clock. And they were having lunch in a restaurant, and they both recount to me the story of a knife flying across the room, sticking in the wall in between the two of them at the lunch table, both of them going, "What the hell?" And then Tova saying, "Oh my God, it's 3 o'clock. The portal's open. You've got to go." So Patrice went across the street, sat down, and closed her eyes, and then became aware that she was greeted by this guy called Richard Cobb, who was a professor of French history in Oxford, and he, kind of like in a "this is your life" tradition, greeted her and took her back time throughout her life and showed her various scenes and told her various things and gave her various insights. So it was a positive experience, but many of the portals, from what I understand, they're all different. Some benevolent, some not, and so yeah, they're, as I understand it, they're all over.
And you think that these like certain Kabbalists have knowledge of where these are?
Yeah, I mean, as you might expect, I on multiple occasions encouraged Patrice to give me access to the portal, but I've given up. She won't. The fear of people. Somebody read her book, City of Secrets, just last year. Took the book physically to the top of Mount Canigou in the Pyrenees, where this legendary portal is, right in between Rennes-le-Chateau and Girona, and died. The book was there. He never came back to his body. And ironically, his wife, who has survived, said that he was just obsessed with the portal and gaining access to it. And she's now going on Patrice's tour, which leaves next weekend for Girona, which is a bit strange. But yeah, maybe someday.
Yeah.
She's afraid I'll die. So
Don't do that.
Yeah, you nearly done that before you came to Brighton.
Yeah.
yeah, God,
That was amazing that you actually made it here, man. Well done.
Yes.
4 hours in the A&E. I now know, I think, where that sort of really bad chest problem, which I couldn't tell what it was at the time. When I was making the documentary, the National Geographic in Bavaria, the German thing, I was in by this Bavarian lake, Lake Chiemsee, where they found the cauldron, and it was like massive blizzard for 2 days out filming with way sub-zero temperatures. So that's my excuse. I'm sticking to it.
Well, you did a valiant job.
Well, when we book guests, we don't like them when they don't turn up, sort of thing. But I think you've got quite a valid excuse, so we'll let you off.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you.
No, good show tonight, man. It's been fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
It was very good, you guys. Good job.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Andrew, particularly, or promote? Or...
Oh, thank you very much. No, not really. I look forward to the hereticmagazine.com. It's coming out June 21st, and if anyone would like to write for it, please contact me either on the Heretic website or my website, which is andrewgough.com.
Do you have any upcoming interviews or anything that we can go find?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to add a section to my website for those interviews. I've got a number of shows coming up, not just Lucy's this weekend, but the Venus Conference in Glastonbury, the Megalithmania Conference in Glastonbury, and some others. So, no, thank you for asking.
And
yeah.
live the conference next weekend at Lucy, or the festival at Lucy's, will be live streamed. So I'll get the details off, and so if anybody wants to
Oh, so we get to see you guys.
yeah,
You get to see Andrew anyway.
and all the guest speakers that are there, which there's a multitude, must be like 20, 30.
There's a lot of action next week.
Including one of my heroes, David Roll, is going to be presenting twice.
Greg Sams is a friend of mine, the guy who does the Sun gazing talks.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy, he really is.
Cool, I'll look forward to that.
Yeah. Can't miss him.
And Andrew, I love your thoughts about the astral projection and, remote viewing. You were right on. It really resonated, and, you were speaking the truth. It really resonated.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
And I have a show on Blog Talk on Thursdays about astral projection, so maybe one day you could even come on there and talk more about the experiences of the astral projection and traveling. That would be interesting too.
I would love to. Thank you very much. It's really nice to have met you.
It was nice to meet you.
This is the
Good job,
chill
Sonic.
clown.
This is the chilled out Type 1 lounge that you can just relax at.
Cross-pollination.
There we
That's
go.
what's about
Haven't talked to
all of us
people,
on Type
have we?
1. It's a family. You know, we're all like a family. It's a whole bunch of people, and we're growing every day. And it's like one big it's like one big family.
Like the Waltons.
Is there any greys in Walton's Mountain, Rita?
Oh no, I haven't. The Greys haven't messed with me lately. I've been with the fairies lately, but the Greys don't really. Since I realized how you can fight back, they don't really mess with me anymore. At the time, they took me off guard.
Excellent.
Hey, Andrew.
Yes.
I just had a quick question. Are you familiar with Organite at all?
I don't think so. What is that?
Yeah, I know. We just kind of seem to ask all of our guests to come on if they know about it or whether or not. But have you heard Wilhelm Reich was a scientist from, what was it, like
Austria.
45, 50 years ago?
Yes.
Maybe even a little further?
Yes.
Right. Well, yeah, he'd come up with this way of, I'm not even sure I can explain it the best, but Sonic,
Discovered
Steve,
orgone
like
energy.
etheric energy? Is that etheric energy and you kind of being able to manipulate it? Is that a...
Yeah. Not bad yet.
We got a couple Organite makers on the site, and I don't know, it's something we've kind of been getting into lately, and I'm just kind of wondering how widespread the idea of it is, I guess, amongst people.
Well, there's going to be somebody talking about it at the festival next week. I can't remember his name, but he's one of the free energy sort of speakers. And he talks...
Someone told me to put it in my garden, so I'll tell you what the results are. I got some Organite in the garden. Let's see what happens.
There's some pictures of Organite, just regularly grown, and then stuff that's been grown with Organite, and the dying is massive.
What you remember that article from the guy from Brighton?
Yeah.
We
were in contact with him. He's not. Well.
So, Andrew, how did you get involved with this? With the thoughts with the bees? What drew you to that area?
I was really drawn to the bees with the Kabbalist I was studying with in Girona when I had gone there, about 6-7 years ago to study Rennes-le-Chateau. We had a bee flying around when we first met, and we just got to talking about bees and studied them with these like long study weekends several times a year. And when I was in Girona meeting with her, I was doing my own research back in London. So it's really independent of the whole bees are dying kind of thing. It's just more of the lost tradition of the veneration of this amazing little creature.
Yeah, it's so strange that creature is so important to us as a civilization, but we never give it a second thought.
No, ever. You want to...
And we get annoyed by them. The bees are buzzing or around our house. We're trying to kill them. We never give a second thought about these little tiny things are so important, and if they're gone, then we're gone.
Exactly. And it's given rise to this, I think, very true mantra of save the bees, save the world.
Mhm. And it's so strange that nobody thinks about it. I've never thought about it until one day someone was talking about it, and I was like, wait, yeah. It was something I never even thought about. We're all busy with these other conspiracies and thoughts that little tiny beautiful insect that's so important nobody really thought about.
Exactly. And it's a wonderful film, The Vanishing of the Bees.
I've seen that.
Oh, you have? Well, isn't that good? That's amazing.
Yeah, that's what made me start thinking about the bees, because before that it never crossed, and we didn't even notice that. It's in, like you said, all these different Egypt pictures, and you see bees everywhere, and to us, we don't even think about it in this generation.
Yeah, that's entirely.
But we're sort of bringing it back around.
Okay.
So, should we keep going?
Yeah. Are you all right, Andrew? Are you having to go?
It looked like Andrew said he had to go.
Yeah, I kind of have to sign off here shortly, if that's okay.
No, we're not on live broadcast now, so you can go in.
Oh, all right.
So yeah, you
can swear if you like.
Yeah, this is a podcast where we just talk. We just chit chat.
Oh,
well, if you want to come back on next week's show for 5 minutes, you can.
Yeah, well, I'm doing a live show from Lucy, so hopefully some of the other guests will come on as well.
Well, I look forward to seeing those of you who are going to be at Lucy's next weekend, and everyone else. I'll see you around one way or another. It's really been fun.
When's your book out? When's the bee?
Probably, I'm trying. Truth is, I'm trying to combine it with a documentary. So that may or may not happen, but I'm delaying the whole thing a bit to see if I could do that. Just like this Divine Women BBC special. It's been on the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to do something like that. So I'm actually, if I'm honest, I'm getting less optimistic it'll be this year, but I think it'll be worth the wait if it is 2000.
Fair enough. Well, if you want to come back on,
Pardon?
If you want
what was
to
that
on,
Let it go.
Yeah, go ahead. So when that comes out, Andrew, you can come back on and.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant.
It's been great.
Yes. If you're back in Brighton, mate, you can come round for a coffee or a tea or.
Yeah. I'll take you up on that.
Or a mead.
Yeah, mead.
Yeah.
All right, mead on the rocks.
Yeah, thank you. You guys take care. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, take care.
Take care, Andrew.
Bye.
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 There we go, Andrew Gough.
Sonic and Steve, that was very good.
Well, that was only.
I never heard of him before. So you brought him to my attention. I never heard of him before. It was a very good interview, you guys.
Thank you.
Wait, we were supposed to have him on the show a couple of weeks ago, weren't we?
Yeah, man. He had a heart attack.
He had a heart attack. Oh,
Oh, that was the guy that was supposed to be on the
still came
TV
down.
show?
Yeah, he was supposed to be live here in the lounge.
The lounge.
The Lichen.
The Lichen.
Yeah, he was supposed to be live in the studio with us, but unfortunately couldn't make it.
Oh, so he lives in the U.S. or he's overseas?
He lives in London.
He's from Chicago.
He's from Chicago, but he lives in London.
Oh, so he lives in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never heard of him. It was excellent, you guys. That was somebody new that you brought to my attention.
Oh,
yeah,
excellent.
check out his website.
He's going to be on your show soon, by the sounds of it. Right off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love his thoughts on with his own experiences and experiences of others of the astral projection. I think it would be a good conversation to really get into that point.
Yeah.
And see what's the similarities to what's going on. Like he was saying, we're more going into their dimension, and I feel that too. I feel that, right now we're all starting to merge, and things are going to get a little crazy. Because all the dimensions are starting to come into one.
Oh. Your show's been the most popular.
Mine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The listening figures for that through the roof.
Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even. I just talked from the heart. I didn't want to have anything written down in the beginning, or I just wanted to see what came out of me and what others brought to the table, and just have a discussion on certain things. I'm glad people are liking it. It was a subject that nobody talks about. We were all.
Oh, nobody said they're liking it. They're just listening. I'm joking, right up.
Well, they're listening. It was
That's the
it makes you think that when I was young, my family used to have me deathly scared of that experience. When I would wake up and have that sleep paralysis, and my family would tell me, they used to scare me, talking about something like, oh, that's a witch, old wise tale, that a witch is riding your back. It had me absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
So, we don't teach our kids when they're younger, when they probably have more innocent
more
interaction.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter suffers from it, and she was telling me about it. My partner as well. But I kind of said, well, when you're in that, where you can't get out, like your mind's awake and your body, your body's still asleep, and you're in that realm. That's the kind of realm, if you can come to your fear, where you can actually do work, so inner work, and manifestation and stuff,
Yeah, if she doesn't want to interact, she could just calm down and say, okay, I want to wake up. She doesn't have to explore if she doesn't want to. But if she removes the fear and tell her it's natural and nothing's going to happen to her, not to be scared. And she could either explore or she could wake up. She has the control.
Well, we naturally go into that realm. Our astral body floats out when we sleep. It's what the Buddhists call a little death. But we do it unconsciously. Astral projection consciously. We go off and we don't know where we are, where we've been asleep for 8 hours. Where the hell have we been? Where's the I been?
And if you ask a lot of different people, because everybody does it. Everybody leaves their body every night. That's why I tell them you do it already. But you'll notice in the astral plane that there's people look like drunk walking. You can tell there's some spirits that are astral bodies that must be asleep in this reality, like in a deep sleep and not conscious, because they're just walking around like they're drunk. You can see souls and spirits walking around like they're drunk.
They're the ones that the adapts, the Aborigines, take the mickey out of.
Yeah, well, it's just that they're not, so a lot of people when they astral project, they're not conscious of it, and they're not conscious at that time. So they're in the astral plane, but they're not one with their consciousness. So it's just like an empty shell, like walking around.
Yeah, that could refer to you being asleep, and there's in Kabbalah there's a realm called Clipper, which is called the world of shells.
But you guys, that was a very good. You guys had good interaction and good questions.
Yeah, and I think maybe as we've got a 2-hour window to just chill.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, you guys got to go on tonight. So why don't you guys get some rest?
Yeah.
Rest your vocal cords.
I did just that, Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's
And
shut
we'll see
down.
you tonight.
Yeah. I'll see you soon, Rita. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
bye,
I'll
y'all.
talk to you guys later on.
Yeah.